in 2017, people on the Coromandel Peninsula signed an open letter to government because we had become so disconcerted at the lack of consultation with us prior to the aerial poisoning of our public conservation lands. Coromandel Peninsula has a very large area of public conservation land managed by Department of Conservation. So the poisoning of our landscape affects our recreational use of our own environment. And I want to give a background to the process of consultation, which we find to be so non-compliant with the multiple rules and regulations governing 1080 aerial operations. So I'll go back to 2013, when there was to be the first aerial 1080 operation on the sacred Moengahau mountain at the north end of Coromandel Peninsula. DOC had announced that it had iwi support for the operation. And this was very disconcerting to people with iwi affiliations, because they knew that there had been no hui and no consultation on their local marae. So I began to investigate how it could be possible for DOC to claim iwi support. I applied for a copy of the application for permission that DOC had made to Environmental Protection Association, and there's a section there that is headed Consultation with Maori. So I had a look at the iwi listed as having been consulted, and they are the leading iwi of the peninsula, indeed, are listed there. So I went to various of the local hapu from these iwi and asked them, had they been consulted? And over again, I found indeed not. Ngāti Huarere gave me a copy of a letter that they had written complaining that they had not been consulted. Te Arawa Trust Boards gave me a letter complaining that they had not been consulted and that they saw no necessity for an aerial drop on a mountain whose canopy was thriving. At the same time, we have two world scientists resident at Port Charles who flew over the Moengahau forest with a helicopter, and they reported to the conservator for Hauraki that the canopy was intact. And the conservator wrote back and said, nevertheless, the operation will proceed. So this was confirmation immediately that Department of Conservation was going to proceed with aerial poisoning regardless of whether it had adequate consultation records or not. Anyway, with that conviction, I continued to investigate consultation with iwi. Now, the application form for permission states that consultation with marae had taken place at Manaia and at Pairoa and at Thames. But these are places very far distant from the northern Coromandel Peninsula where the poisoning was to take place on Mount Moengahau. So I went to the kaumātua of the local marae, Te Paia marae and Harataonga marae at Kennedy Bay, and Koputauaki Community Centre. And at Koputauaki, I asked, who are these people representing Ngāti Rongo'u? And they were Moengahau Ngā Tangata Whenua Trust. It turned out that Ngā Tangata Whenua Trust are a group of contractors who work with Department of Conservation on their poisoning predator control programs. And the real kuia for Ngāti Rongo'u is Frances Henare. So I spoke to her, and she said that I could confirm her mandate to speak for Rongo'u if I could find the minutes of Waikato Regional Council where an application had been made for a milling road to go through the community. And it was at that time, I think in 2015, when the Regional Council had established that the mandated spokesperson for Rongo'u was Frances Henare. And indeed, I found those minutes, and they confirm that the council had investigated who was mandated to speak, and it was Frances Henare. Now, why would DOC consult a contracting group to represent Rongo'u when there was a mandated kuia? And what was really striking to me in my conversation with Frances is that Frances is strongly opposed to the poisoning of public conservation lands. So this was a pattern I then found throughout consultation. Winiata Harrison, the great revered kaumātua for Harataonga Marae, which is within the vicinity of Moengahau, had not been consulted. There had been no porphyry onto his marae, and sure enough, he was strongly opposed to the use of TN80. So this then became a theme, that the consultation process conducted by Department of Conservation is selective. And Department of Conservation repeatedly says it has the support of its iwi treaty partners. And these are the people who have met with DOC on these marae listed in the application for permission at Manaia, at Pairoa, at Thames. But in further investigation, I found that these iwi representatives did not hold any hui with their hapu and iwi members to ask whether there was support for aerial poisoning of the public conservation lands. They had met with DOC to discuss the transfer of land title to their iwi under the Pare Hauraki Treaty Settlement. So they were representatives for a very different purpose. Now, I then again investigated DOC's consultation processes in 2017 when Papakai and Moengahau were both to have aerial poisoning of public conservation land. And the first thing I noticed was the consultation logs presented in 2017 were almost identical to the consultation logs from 2013. So the same iwi were named and the same kaumātua were named. But in 2017, Awanui Black, who represented Ngāti Pukenga ki Tūronga at Manaia, he had died. But in 2017, he still appears in the consultation log as being consulted. So this made it very clear to me that consultation is fabricated. Now, I sent a very thoroughly documented complaint to the Chief Executive Officer of Environmental Protection Authority. In 2013, I did that, and I did it again in 2017. On both occasions, I received no formal response to my complaints, and my complaints have never appeared in any Environmental Protection Authority report or publication. So here is what should be an open public process suppressed and denied. I wrote to the CEO of Environmental Protection Authority and said I would like a formal response to my complaints that had demonstrated that consultation is selective and fabricated. And 3 months later, I simply got a small email in one sentence from one of the HASNO enforcement officers, simply stating consultation was not fabricated, in spite of all my documentation. So in 2019, with the Whenua-Kite aerial poisoning of the Whenua-Kite Public Conservation Forest, I called for copies of the consultation logs submitted by the rangers, and I noticed very interesting things. Firstly, that institutions which no longer existed were listed in those logs. For example, the Steiner Kindergarten at Lindisfarne in Coromandel Town does not exist. It's listed in the log. There is a play centre in Thames on the opposite side of the range, a preschool. It's listed as being in the consultation log. Now, why would toddlers in a preschool be concerned about a forest on the other side of the range? So I started to look at what was left out, and very noticeably, of the long-term conservation groups working on the Coromandel Peninsula, Moengahau Environment Group is listed as consulted for the Whenua-Kite operation. And yet, other equally hard-working, equally long-term conservation groups such as Kuatunu Environmental Action, KIA, Manu Waiata Restoration and Protection Society were not consulted, were not listed. So what's the difference between MEG and KIA and Manu Waiata? It is MEG receives very extensive funding to use poisons for predator control from Department of Conservation and Waikato Regional Council, whereas KIA since 2007 has had a kaupapa of ngā rongoa Māori o te whenua, poison-free lands. Manu Waiata, since its establishment in the year 1999, has been concerned to protect the quality of water in streams as native fish habitat, and we too are strongly opposed to the use of TN80. So again, 2013, 2017, 2019, consultation has been selective. And this is why the open letter to Parliament talks about DOC does not have the social license to carry out this operation. So, Department of Conservation has fabricated its consents, and this is the reason I insist on saying fabrication. DOC says we have consulted our treaty partners, but the HASNO Act, Section 5, and the Resource Management Act, Section 5, state that there is a responsibility of managers to provide for the community and the public to participate in the management of their own environment. Now, the community and the public are not DOC's iwi partners. They are the people who live in the local marae. They are the people who hunt in the public conservation forests. They are the people who supported the Coromandel Colville Community Board to pass resolutions opposing the use of poisoning and supporting hunting and trapping in 2007 resolutions. in 2009, 2013, 2017. Those resolutions have been reaffirmed by the community and the public. And it is the Has No Act Section 5 that Department of Conservation has to comply with. So making consultation selective, making consultation with our iwi partners involved in the transfer of land under Pare Hauraki Treaty Settlement. These are not criteria that serve the purposes of the Act. Thank you.